Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. This is not really typically what I do on this channel, but it's something I really enjoy and I would like to do more of, especially going into the new year. I love to read. It's probably my number one hobby. In 2024, I've read almost 90 books, I'm pretty sure, which is crazy because I really discovered audiobooks like the end of 2023. I hit 50 books on audiobook and 40s on physical copies. I did go through like a big physical reading slump, I think in like September. So I did drop a little bit lower there. 90 books is a lot. I love to read and I would love to do more reading videos into the new year. Here are my top 24 books of 2024. We're going to start at number 24 and work our way all the way to number 1. And again, these are all really, really good books that I loved this year. I would recommend any of these books to absolutely anyone. Starting at 24 is Before We Were Yours. This one was one that my best friend let me borrow of hers that I ended up purchasing my own copy because I wanted to have one on my shelf. So this is a historical fiction book about siblings who were taken from their home and put into this orphanage to be sold to richer families. So they were from a poor family, but a good family, and taken to be given to richer families. So it's about the stories of these siblings, how they grow up, their lives are later. One of the granddaughters finds out this like big secret about her grandmother, and it was so good. I love this book. It kept me on the edge of my seat. Really, really great. I gave this one 5 stars. Everything on this list is between 4 and 5 stars. Next, this was actually an audiobook I listened to, and it was Carrie Soto Is Back. I chose the audiobook because I heard so many mixed reviews on this book. I like Taylor Jenkins Reid's writing. I was not a big fan of Malibu Rising, another historical fiction book from her. I wanted to listen to the audiobook just to see how I felt. I flew through this book. It was so good. There was like a lot of tennis talk into it, which I didn't understand, but overall the story was fabulous. Loved this book. Highly recommend. Really great. And I think she's coming out with a new book next year, which I'm really excited about. Next, my goal was to read some more classics this year, and this was the only one I got to. And I did listen to the audiobook simply because it is so incredibly long, and I don't have the time to read that long of books physically, and that was Jane Eyre. I love this book. I listen to audiobooks a lot on walks, especially when the weather's nice. Like every afternoon, I try to get the stroller out and we go for a walk around the neighborhood. This was the book like the beginning of summer, end of spring, like the weather's starting to be really beautiful. So I think that's another reason why I really love this book. Is very atmospheric for me. It was such a sweet story and definitely something I will reread in the future. I'm not going to tell the story of Jane Eyre because it's literally a classic. Number 21 is Bye Baby. I listened to the Redheads Book Club podcast, the sub podcast book club of the Morning Toast podcast, which, hello, big toaster. So I try to keep up with the Redheads and love this book. It's mystery thriller, but a little bit more chill, and it involves like a lot of rich Upper East Side stay-at-home moms and like influencers, and like I love that life. The richer the people are, the better the book it's gonna be for me. It did not end near how I wanted it to end. It was definitely worth the time and a really great read. Next, at number 20, I started ACOTAR the end of last year. I read it physically and I wasn't that into it, but I wanted to continue the series just to see what the hype was about. So I decided to do the audiobooks. My favorite one was A Court of Wings and Ruin. I think that's the third one. That's like the one where things really got good. And I think the series is worth it for that one book, but it really drops off after that. I did not finish A Court of Silver Flames, which is the last book. It's a very thick book, and I was audiobooking this whole series at this point. It is so sexual and so gross. I listen to my audiobooks when I'm on a walk with my daughter. So they have to be G-rated, PG-rated. And this was like, I never heard these things before in my life. But A Court of Wings and Ruin was really great. I think all of them have like maybe one spicy scene, except the last one. It was like spicy from the get-go. And I was like, I don't need to know the end of the story that bad. I don't care this much about these books. Even if you just read like the first 3 books, I think you're good to wrap up the series there. Do not read A Court of Silver Flames. Just don't do it. Next, another redhead's book, and that is Lady Tan's Circle of Women. I was very skeptical about this book. It's a historical fiction book based in, I believe, China. I had never read any like Chinese historical fiction, Chinese fiction, anything like that. And this was so fascinating. The Eastern medicine of it all and how the women really took care of each other, different class hierarchies that there are. Very, very fascinating. It's about friendship, love, and sisterhood. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. Another great historical fiction recommendation. I don't think this is historical fiction. Number 18 is literary fiction, and that is Pineapple Street. This is another like rich New York family, multiple POVs. The main character is this girl who's marrying into the family who does not come from wealth. Just really their perspective on the family and the ins and outs of their relationship and money and finances and all that kind of stuff. And I was very fascinated by this book. I would love more books like this. If you have any of those recommendations, please comment them down below. I would love to read more about like what the rich are like. Number 17 is Kite Runner. This is another historical fiction book. Apparently it's the year of historical fiction for me, also given to me by my best friend. And I was like so iffy about this. The cover of it, I was like, this looks like some boys video game kind of thing. It's not. It's so good. It's about this man who grew up, I believe, in Iran during the war, and his trek to America, his life in America, and him going back to Iran and seeing how things kind of panned out, seeing where his friends ended up. It was so good. And again, it was another like perspective that I hadn't read before, like Lady Tan's Circle of Women. I love World War II historical fiction. Like that's immediately where I go. So I'm trying to branch out more because I know I love the genre, and I definitely want to continue to read more books in those locations moving forward. And I really did not expect to love this book as much as I did. Number 16, we have a cute, cheesy romance, and that is Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren. This is the first Christina Lauren book I've ever read. Just never really got around to reading any of her books before, but this one was absolutely adorable. It did get like a little raunchy at some points. It was never anything like too bad. I still really enjoyed the book. I flew through it. And this was one of those books that I was like, I really love romances. Why did I stop reading these so much? I like a quick, good story kind of thing. The latter half of this year, after my reading slump, I've really been trying to focus on a lot more romance books. It's about this poor girl going into a rich family. So there was like that whole aspect, and they like rented out a whole island in Thailand. Highly recommend. Number 15 is Dinner for Vampires, the memoir of Bethany Joy Lenz. She played Haley James Scott in One Tree Hill. I love One Tree Hill, and I love her. This book was so fascinating. It's her story of getting in and being in a cult, getting married in the cult, all while on her time being on the show One Tree Hill. So that's just like crazy that this was all happening at the same time. She dabbled a little bit with her relationships with the cast of One Tree Hill while she was in the cult, but I mean, she was in a cult, so she was pretty like separated from everyone else, which I thought was very fascinating. I didn't watch the show when it was coming out. I was too young. This was definitely like the memoir of the year. It was incredible. Number 14 is Practice Makes Perfect. This is the second book of the When in Rome little series by Sarah Adams. I did read When in Rome, and I liked it, but I didn't like it near as much as I liked Practice Makes Perfect. I just read this a few weeks ago. Loved it. It was so adorable, and now I'm reading my third Sarah Adams book, like within the past month or two. Been binging them and loving them so much, and I have the rest of them requested from the library, so hopefully I'll be getting those soon. It's about this girl who's just very shy, has that reputation of being a sweet, shy girl. She falls for kind of like the bad guy, but he's not a bad guy kind of thing. Small town romance where the small town has a lot of input. I don't want to give too much away because these are characters from the first book, so you have to read When in Rome to know Practice Makes Perfect. Recommend going in order on those. Number 13, we have a little novella, and that is Powerful by Lauren Roberts. So we'll get to the top later, but Powerless is a fantasy book that was absolutely incredible, and this was the novella, and I love this. This is about the main character's best friend Adina and like her backstory while Powerless is happening, what's going on with her. Really interesting. It was fun to be back in the Powerless world for a little bit, but again, I'm not going to give away spoilers for Powerless. Number 12 is Summer Romance. I also discovered Annabelle Monaghan this year. Such a fabulous author. Good, quick summer romances that are wholesome. There are no spice in these books, and they are just good writing, sweet relationships, and summer romance was her book that came out this past year, but they're so good. Like, I highly recommend you pick up an Annabelle Monaghan book. I've already pre-ordered her book coming out next summer. Can't say enough good things. She's definitely one of my favorite authors now from her 3 books that I read within a month of each other because they were so good. Number 11 is Same Time Next Summer by Abby Jimenez. So this is also part of the interconnected standalone Part of Your World series. I think I discovered Abby Jimenez last year or the year before and binged all of her books. I pretty much love everything she writes. There's one book that was like, I'm really a big fan of yours truly. That's just me. I felt like, it sounds bad, but like they talk a lot about like mental health issues, and I just didn't feel like all the details were that relevant. It was like the whole story, and I just wanted to like read the romance of it, you know? Same Time Next Summer was so good and so sweet characters. Every time like I've heard people talk about this, it's like the definition of if he wanted to, he would. I'll leave it at that. It's very sweet. There might be one spice scene. I just skip those pages. It's not really my cup of tea. Number 10 is The Women by Kristen Hanna. Surprisingly, this is my only Kristen Hanna book I've read so far this year. The Women was her book that she released this year. I will say it was not my favorite book of hers. Obviously, The Nightingale is my favorite book of hers, and Firefly Lane. This one was just like step down. So it's about this girl who goes to be a nurse in Vietnam or Korean War. Honestly, I don't remember. I read this book the day it came out, like March maybe. So it's been a minute. Like the first half is all about her life in the war, being a nurse and all that kind of stuff. The end is about when she returns home, and it's just like really fast and speedy, dealing with PTSD after a war and like all of the mental things and life adjustments she had coming back to the US. Like, I get the literary aspects of it, but I just felt like we needed a little more. I don't know. It just was like a little difficult for me. I read it with some of my friends. We started a little book club this year, and we all kind of had the same feelings about that. But like, we agreed it was good for the book. It just wasn't good for like our personal reading taste, if that makes sense. You really cannot go wrong with a Kristen Hanna book. Number 9, we have a thriller, and that is None of This Is True. This was another book from the Redheads this year. They really knocked it out of the park this year, and I love keeping along with them because I read a lot on my own, but I don't really have anyone to talk to about it with. Once a month, I read one of their books, and I get to listen to the podcast and hear what all the girlies think about it, which is really fun. I think it was like the first or second book of the year. Very like psychological, what this woman does to other people, family did to this other woman, and they record this podcast, and like I was really believing her this entire time. It was phenomenal. I'm not gonna give spoilers, but highly recommend this book. Number 8 is After I Do. This is a Taylor Jenkins Reid book on Kindle Unlimited. This was the first book I read to get out of my reading slump this fall. So it's about this couple who like has this whirlwind, like beautiful college romance and falls in love and gets married, but then like what happens after they get married and just kind of like the slow deterioration of their marriage. And they decide to take a year apart from each other and live apart, find if they still want to be together, why they still love each other. So good. I sped through this book. Cheap, affordable, great read. Love this book. Would buy the physical copy to keep on my shelf so other people could read it. I messed this up. So number 11, I said Same Time Next Summer, another Annabelle Monaghan book. And number 7 is Just for the Summer, which is the Abby Jimenez book. I typed this wrong in my phone. Well, I did type it right, but I talked about it wrong. Just for the Summer is the Abby Jimenez book that I previously talked about. The Same Time Next Summer is what I put in number 11. Both great books. I already talked about all the Annabelle Monaghan books. Number 6, I have Swan Song, and so this was Ellen Hildebrand's last book that she came out with this year. She's probably one of my favorite authors of all time. I only have like 3 books left of hers that I haven't read, and she has so many books. Great beachy reads, quick, multiple multiple POVs. She has a winter series. Incredible. If you have not read Ellen Hildebrand yet, I highly recommend. I think it might be her final book ever, or it's her final book based on Nantucket. All of her books are based on Nantucket. I feel like because I've read so many of her books, it really like tied a nice bow on everything, and it connected so many stories from so many different books, which is why I loved it so much. This was another book I read with my friends in our little book club. They hadn't read near as many Ellen Hildebrand books as I had, so they weren't as pleased with it as I was. But the ending of this book, if you know, you know, it gets you, and it was just like a perfect way to end like her Nantucket series. Loved it. 5 stars. Number 5 is the first Annabelle Monaghan book that I read this year, is Nora Goes Off Script. 2 of the books are about single moms, which I think is a fun element. It just makes them a bit more mature. Nora Goes Off Script is about this mom who's divorced, and it's like right after her divorce, so she's like trying to find who she is again. She is a screenwriter, and one of her books gets bought. They want to film at her house in her small town. Lead actor comes and he stays in her front yard in his trailer, and the rest is history. But it was like a good mature romance is what I would say about it. It's not like high school cheesy kind of thing. Number 4 is Daisy Hates the Great Undoing. The Magnolia Park series is probably my favorite book series of all time. And this Daisy Hates book really like took the cake for me. Can't say much. It's like the 4th in a series. I held off on reading it until the beginning of this year, and it was worth every minute. If you have not read Magnolia Parks, please do it. I think the first 2 are on Kindle Unlimited, and then the rest have just been traditionally published, so you can pretty much get them anywhere. I see them at Target all the time. Number 3 is Magnolia Parks Into the Dark. So this is the last of the Magnolia Park series. The Daisy Hates is still going to continue, I believe, but this wraps up Magnolia and BJ's story. It tied a nice bow on everything. It wasn't as addicting as the other books because they were just like a lot more high stakes in the last one, so you know it's going to wrap up with a nice bow on it, but there is like a big emotional part of the book. It's really sweet and like really steals your heart away. Read Magnolia Parks, please. Number 2. This one is a book I read at the beginning of the summer and has lived rent-free in my head, and that is The Rom-Commers by Catherine Center. I love Catherine Center. I started reading her books last year and have just kept it going. This one is by far my favorite. I loved The Bodyguard, but The Rom-Commers just really did something to me. A sweet and mature, I feel like, is like the romances that I really loved this year. I read some Elsie Silver this year. Elsie Silver is not for me. I want something a little bit more mature, and I feel like I found that in The Rom-Commers, but still feeling that sweet cheesiness at the same time. So this is about a girl who she writes screenplays, and this one gets bought, but the condition is the director wants her to go and write the screenplay together. She goes and lives with him in LA. It was a sweet story, and I really, really loved it. I got the special edition hardback cover of the book because it was so good. And coming in at number 1, my favorite book of the year. I know I spoiled it earlier, but it is Powerless by Lauren Roberts. And this was actually the first book I finished at the beginning of the year, which is crazy that it's my number 1, and it's what I've gone back to ever since. The end of last year is when I kind of started dabbling in fantasy. Fourth Wing was the first one I read. I did Iron Flame and I did ACOTAR, and then I went into Powerless. It like just really takes the cake. It's kind of Hunger Games like royalty. It has he's rich, she's poor, has special abilities, does have like the sequel Reckless that came out later, and I liked it. Nothing crazy happens until literally the last page, which I'm really excited for the 3rd book to come out, which comes out in the spring. Powerless just like really took the cake. It's definitely something I would like to reread someday. Highly recommend all these books. Let me know if you guys like this video and if you'd like to see more book videos from me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!